All right, I'm going to call this regular meeting of the LASD Board of Trustees to order. A recording and/or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, and the recording and/or broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. We will start by calling the roll. Ms. Spicer.
Here.
Mr. Talio.
Here.
Ms. Surkay.
Here.
Mr. Ivanovich.
Present.
I'm also present. All board members are present. D2, agenda approval. Would anyone like to provide comment or motion concerning the agenda?
I'd like to move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'd like to second it.
Motion to approve the agenda made by Vladimir, seconded by Shali. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I will call the roll. Jessica?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Shali?
Yes.
Vladimir?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. D3, closed session report. No action was taken in closed session. D4, superintendent's update. Mr. Bear.
Yeah, good evening. I will save comments until later into the meeting, Brian.
All right, we will move on to section E, our annual organization, starting with E1, the oath of office. Mr. Bear.
Yes, want to congratulate Steve and Jessica for another term on the Los Altos School District Board of Trustees. As a part of that, we take the oath of office. So I'm going to ask each of you to raise your right hand and repeat. We haven't done a Zoom oath of office before, so this is a first. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Jessica Spicer, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
And
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
and without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
Without
any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
discharge the
the duties
duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. I'm glad you're back.
Thank you.
It was a long absence.
Having once again scared absolutely everybody out of their way. All right, so now we move on to election of our officers. Just as a reminder, since we haven't done this in a year, we're going to do it president, vice president, and then clerk. And for each, we're going to need a motion for someone to assume that role. So we'll start with E2, election of the president. The floor is open for nomination motions.
Brian, I'd like to nominate Vashali Surkay for president.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Motion to elect Shali as president made by Vladimir, seconded by Jessica. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I will call the roll. Jessica.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Shali.
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations, Shali. With my last 5 minutes, I will move on to election of vice president. Floor is open for motions of nomination.
I move to nominate Steve Talio as vice president.
I'd like to second.
All right. Motion to elect Steve as vice president made by Jessica, seconded by Shali. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Jessica.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Shali,
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to clerk. The floor is now open for motions of nomination for clerk.
I nominate myself for clerk.
I'll second.
All right. Motion to elect Jessica Spicer as clerk made by Jessica, seconded by Vladimir. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I call the roll. Jessica,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Shali,
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations to our new officers. Everyone should now get up, walk around your desk, and sit back down in your new position.
So it looks like I'm going to have to train another person to second the motions that I make. And I don't know who to ask.
It's been a pleasure and an honor to second your motion.
All right, and with that, I will hand the virtual gavel over to Shali.
I have my old Toastmasters gavel. All right. Moving on to agenda item E5, 2021 board procedures. The Board of Trustees will consider approving the 2021 board procedures. Do I have a motion to approve the 2021 board procedures?
So moved.
Can I have a second? Oh, okay, excellent. Okay. Any further board discussions? Okay, so the motion was made by Vladimir, seconded by Jessica. I'll do a roll call vote. Brian,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Vladimir,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Item E6, 2021 board committees and appointments. The Board of Trustees will discuss the committee assignments and appointments for the upcoming year. Final approval will take place at the board meeting on January 11th, 2021. Have all the board members had a chance to look over the list of current board committees and appointments? Okay. Well, I think what I will do is just go down the list and we can just discuss as we go along. The Budget Review Committee in 2020, the representative was Vladimir.
I'm okay.
You're okay to continue? Okay.
As long as nobody else wants the position, or it depends whether Randy is in favor or not,
Okay, the next one is the City of Los Altos / LASD Schools Committee. Currently, it's myself and Vladimir. I'm happy to stay on.
I just want to mention, having had a recent conversation with Nisa Flygor, who is now mayor of Los Altos, she would very much like to see this committee pick up its pace and meet more frequently in the coming year, in case that factors in.
Yeah, I think we would like that also.
Thanks.
So, Vladimir, do you want to continue?
Sure.
Okay. Is everyone else, anyone else? Okay. The City of Los Altos Hills / LASD Schools Committee. This year it was myself and Jessica Spicer. You want to stay on? Does anyone else want to take that on?
I don't mind staying on. It's not been really busy.
No.
Question: Have there been many meetings up there this year?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Okay, I will continue us. The County Committee on School District Organization. This year it was Brian Johnson.
Yeah, and this is actually a designated voter, essentially. So I actually think we should make this, I would argue we could remove this from the list or make it the practice to just have this be the current board president. Because this is basically just, the only role is what I did, I think, at the last meeting or the one before, where we voted for Jody Muirhead as one of the representatives on that committee. There's no actual responsibility other than that.
Okay, how do the rest of you feel if it's the board president?
I think that's a great idea.
Sounds
Okay,
fine.
excellent. Then I will put my name down. Curriculum Council. This year it's Steve Taglio.
So Sandra, did we ever meet? Did you invite me if you met?
One time at the beginning of the school year to review our new LCAP thing, and then we'll be starting again in January. We just fleshed out our planning.
Great.
So would you like to continue, Steve?
I'm comfortable continuing. It's not been a huge lift and definitely always educational at least.
Okay, awesome. The District English Language Advisory Committee. This year it was me. And I do believe they meet monthly.
Mm-mm.
No, they don't meet.
No, it's usually 3 times a year, maybe 4, 3 to 4.
I'm happy to stay on, but I'm also happy to give this to someone else if you would like it.
I'd be willing to take this over, Shally. Since
Okay. Put Brian there. The Wellness Committee. This year, Mr. Steve Taglio.
Again, that one never met, did it? Is it supposed to?
That's a great question. We met probably a year plus ago when we just started down the path of looking at our comprehensive sexual education program.
Right.
And then we kind of stalled on that.
And what about, given all the concerns we have about mental health going on within the with the pandemic and school closures opening, all that stuff, are we going to have any conversations about that in a committee, or are we just feeling
Maybe,
comfortable?
I think Erin Green and I kind of co-chair that. So maybe Erin, Jennifer Kiker, Monica, and myself can figure out a plan for our wellness committee moving forward for this year.
Yeah, if we're going to do something, I know it comes up more, so I just would encourage us to have maybe more conversations there.
Yep.
So does that mean, Steve, that you want to stay on? Okay. Okay, moving on to board appointments. For charter school meetings, for 2020, we have Brian and Jessica. How do you guys feel? Does anyone else want to take this on?
I mean, I'm certainly willing to continue on this role. We haven't had a ton of meeting. I mean, it blows hot and cold, right? Given that we have the agreement and everything going on with the pandemic. I don't know how many meetings we'll have in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I would prefer to defer that to when we get closer to something that's of consequence, because right now, as Brian said, there's not much to do.
Do you mean defer the appointments? Which 2 board members are responsible for that? To one that,
Because it may,
Yeah,
it may be certain skills are needed or certain, that, and we don't know what those are.
well, and these can be changed at any time, right? It just takes board action. So we can just leave Jessica and my name on there for now, just for continuity. And then we can always revisit, as Vladimir says, if there are major decisions or negotiations to be had.
Jessica, are you okay with, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I was going to tell you I'm willing to stay on. And that I agree with Vladimir that we should when it actually is more of an issue that we're really focusing on, that we can revisit it then. It's a good idea.
Okay. Excellent. Moving on, communications and community relations. This year it's Jessica. Would you?
I like doing it.
You like doing it?
I do.
Okay, I'm gonna move you on. The next one is Community Health Awareness Council, better known as CHAC. I would like to stay on if no one opposes. I'm on the Community Engagement Committee this year with NISA, so I do see her quite a bit. If you're all okay with that, I will pull my name across. Facility/modernization. Jessica, it's you this year. How do you? Sorry.
I don't care either way. So if somebody has a hankering, they can take it. If not, I'm willing to stay on.
Does anyone else feel very strongly that they would like to take on facility/modernization?
What's the role and the workload on this one?
I don't remember any right now.
None.
Same amount of work we have all done, basically.
I think I'll just say, I think in the last year, I think the committee workload in general has probably been disproportionately light, with the exception of possibly communications and outreach. just because of the current pandemic situation.
So should I forward your name, Jessica, for 2021, or does anyone else feel strongly?
Or,
Okay.
I was kind of light last year. I only had 2. So if you want to slot me into anything that's left over, slot me in is my other thought.
Okay. How do you feel, Jessica?
He could take it. Go for
Okay.
it.
All right. I'll put Steve for facilities and modernization. Legislative.
Another no meeting. I love those.
I see a pattern developing here. Legislative network, Vladimir. How do you feel about that?
I'm willing to continue. I'm also willing to allow somebody else to take it if they wanted. I don't recall any activity that I did last year on that front.
Okay. You want to continue then?
Sure.
Okay. MVLA PTA Council, Jessica. How do you feel about that?
I like going to the meetings, but if somebody wants to take it over, I'm okay with that too. It's a really good way to have a finger on the pulse of our parents. So I'm good either way. So.
And that person also runs the LASD PTA Council meetings, right?
No, we don't do it. We only just go.
Oh, right, of course.
We
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'd be willing to take it over, but if Jessica wants to continue, that's fine with me too, either way. I feel like I'm light because I unloaded myself last year because I was president. So sort of like Steve, I'm willing to take over and balance the load a little bit more.
And you take it. You can take it, Brian.
All right.
Okay. Great. And the Santa Clara County School Boards Association. Vladimir, I've got you as our representative for 2020. How do you feel about that for next year?
I've gone to a number of the meetings. I know that Jessica and Brian have gone as well. I'm happy. I intend to go to as many as I can the next year, regardless. But if you guys want to put your name down there, that's fine with me. I don't care.
I think I've been to 1 or 2 of those meetings. They've taken on a little bit of a different flavor this year with the pandemic. But whose ever name we put down, I think they always welcome whoever wants to show up and sit in the audience anyway. So
yeah, the only difference is that the official representative is the only one who's technically allowed to vote when there's votes required.
Yeah, and I don't think that this year, at least I wasn't there during any vote. I don't know if you guys were there during a vote.
It's occasional, like, I mean, it's budget stuff, sort of similar to any organization like this. Every once in a while, they just need to like approve budgets and audits and stuff, but there's rarely significant voting.
But in any case, unless somebody else wants it, I'm happy to continue.
okay, great, Vladimir. Then I'm going to put your name down for 2021. Great, thank you. And all right, so the 2021 board committees and appointments will be brought back to the January 11, 2021 regular meeting for approval. So I guess if you change your mind between now and then, you can let us know. All right, I'd like to move on to the consent calendar now. Item F on the agenda. Would any board members like to provide comment on the agenda? Okay. Well, then can I please have a motion to approve consent items F1 through F7?
Move that we approve consent items F1 through F7 as presented.
Can I have a second?
I'm speechless, but I'll second.
Okay, Brian made the motion, Vladimir seconded. I'd like to take a roll call vote now. Brian?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Vladimir?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. Excellent. Okay, moving on to agenda item G, employee request to address the board. From the Los Altos Teachers Association, is Ricky who? Here? I think I pushed this.
Yes, he is.
He is.
I can hear me.
Well, your eyes move faster than mine, Brian. Okay. Oh, yeah.
All right. Thanks. Well, happy last school week of 2020. I want to thank Jessica and Steve first for their continued commitment to the board and to all of our students, families, and staff during this challenging time. I'm also really impressed by your commitment to the California Constitution, so I appreciate that as well. We look forward to partnering with you all in the years to come. We had a sudden and late flip to return to virtual instruction this week. I just wanted to acknowledge the teachers and the work that it took them this weekend to flip their plans on short notice. It's another speed bump in a year full of speed bumps and of change and compromises and anxiety, and as well as growth and learning. Teachers are going the extra mile this year to support students academically, socially, emotionally, and especially in issues concerning health and safety. And we just continue partnering with you and with staff to acknowledge and honor our amazing teachers so that we can do that job of supporting our students in this year. So thanks, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday and a happy new year.
Thanks, Ricky. Happy holidays to you as well. Moving on, is there anyone who would like to speak for the California School Employees Association? CSEA? No? Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item H, community comments. This time is reserved for citizens and employees to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items, except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make a brief comment or ask clarifying questions. All right. We will now take public comment. To comment on items not on the agenda, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Would anyone like to address the board? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to move on. On to our action discussion items. School reopening update. Staff will review the progress on the return of students to campuses. Mr. Bear.
Yes. Well, we returned our 4th and 5th graders last week, and then, as you know, had to make the decision to pause our in-person learning. So I just wanted to say a quick word about that. There's really 2 reasons why we might need to pause in-person learning for any reason, and both of those are rooted in science and at the advice of public health experts, both at the county level and the state level. Right. The first is that we aren't able to implement either local or statewide public health requirements. That would be a reason that we'd pause. The other is because we've met the threshold for COVID positive cases set up by the state, and the county has directed us to either shut down a campus or the district or a classroom. This week's action was really about the first of those 2 reasons, that we we hit a place where we were concerned about whether we could staff a number of positions within the district, not having substitutes and not having the ability to flex as we normally do. And so we did make that decision. It's certainly not one we took lightly, but we really do put the health and safety. We've said it from the very beginning that we put this health and safety of our students and our staff at the very top of the list in what we do. That's in any year, and that is especially in this year. So it wasn't an easy decision. We are committed to in-person learning, as we have been from the very start, being one of the only public districts in the county open. But again, we need to be sure it is safe. It's a very challenging balancing act, balancing those things, but it's one we have taken on, and so far implemented very successfully. I'll remind you also, board, that we talked about the continuum of instruction back in July as we were vetting our reopening plan, and this was set up so that we can adapt to changing circumstances on our campuses. And so this is an example of that. I just want to acknowledge, we know it's challenging for everyone, families and staff alike. It requires flexibility and collaboration, and we're working to be open as soon as possible. And we will continue communicating that along the way as quickly as we can and as clearly as we can. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide and give you some updates. You can see there's a new pause button there, but we have brought our 4th and 5th graders back. 6th graders are next in line on January 11th. So we look forward to that. Next slide. And this is a bit of a repeat from what I have shared. Want to acknowledge, and I'm actually going to point to one of our district nurses who's here, Monica Sidher, in just a moment to give some color to this. But we did pause this week due to the fact that we reached a very concerning level about whether we were going to be able to implement all of the health and safety protocols that were required. And I've answered a number of emails, and the questions are really focused on whether we have enough teachers. And I want to make clear that teachers are vitally important to what we do. They're our lifeblood. But this year we have a huge number of support staff really carrying out critical health and safety requirements in terms of supervision, cleaning, monitoring, and without those folks, we really have trouble adhering to the situation. So Monica, do you mind just taking a couple of minutes to describe a bit more about that and what that means, and what types of concerns we have about the trend in absences?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you to the board. So moving forward, we've had, taking a look back and at our current situation, we've had a lot of absences related to either illnesses. So staff responding saying they are not well enough to be on campus, which is part of our health and safety protocol of answering the symptom tracker and not reporting to work if they don't feel well. Having them follow up then with their provider and or be tested, and knowing that testing period returns for the test dates take some time, take anywhere from 48 up to 5 days. And we're seeing a lengthier time for returns for tests now as well, which then also keeps staff members out. We are also noticing that with more staff out, we are unable then to quickly, as we've done in past years, have subs come in, move other staff to support extra classrooms or extra groups of students. Again, really trying to keep cohorts stable, keeping cohorts together, really minimizing any unnecessary exposure to anybody outside of that cohort setting has become more and more challenging. And also looking ahead to a lot of the holidays, people getting together over the holidays, travel over the holidays, some of the new orders that have come into place that have then impacted the staffing, and have had us stop and pause and think about how do we support our student learning? How do we keep everybody safe on campus without doing this cross exposure and potential cross contamination?
Yep. Thank you, Monica. As we think about that in a normal year, I think we we all tend to try to power through, right? If we have sniffles or aren't quite feeling right or have a headache or a stomach ache, this is the year we're asking everyone not to do that. We're asking students not to do that. And that's why we have families filling out symptom checkers, and we're asking our staff not to do that because we need to be careful about those symptoms as directed by county and state health. So, and as we look at the projection, the trend line on that, they are going up. They have gone up for the past several weeks, and they're on a pretty steep incline right now. And these absences come from both symptoms that are displayed, as well as staff being identified as close contacts because of a positive COVID case somewhere. Would maybe in our schools, it could be in their personal lives as well, right? The close contacts aren't just limited to those in our schools and in our workplaces. So looking ahead to January, we're seeing that upward trend. We are recommending, and we'd like to take board commentary on remaining in distance learning for the week of January 4th and planning a return on January 11th. And I want to remind everyone that our goal here is sustaining in-person instruction in the long term, right? We want to make sure that we are here to serve in person in that long term. So next slide. So we have been reporting where percentages are in terms of what families are choosing. This is again what 4th, 5th, and 6th, and also 7th and 8th. We had a big reporting day on December 7th for grades 6, 7, and 8. And you can see what the movement looks like. We did have some 6th graders move to virtual, 4%. And junior high school, they have all been distance right now, but right now we have right about 2/3 requesting blended or in-person learning, and 1/3 wanting to remain in virtual. So those are the numbers by parent requests that have come through. Next slide. Sandra, do you want to talk about LASD Plus?
Sure.
Would you mind?
Yep, no problem. So we did over the last couple of weeks, you knew we were running a separate LASD employee childcare program as we were getting ready to launch our LASD Plus program. It just seemed like, looking at the numbers and the staffing, that merging those programs made the most sense. So instead of having one central childcare, we now have 3 sites. Is that right, Jeff? Who have childcare for our staff. And now each of our sites has an LASD Plus program up and running, serving students. So overall, we're serving about 89 elementary students, and we have 24 junior high school students being served across our 2 campuses. I chatted with principals a little bit last week about, like, what are some anecdotes? How do we know LASD Plus is making a difference for students? And principals were able to share just some really nice feedback that they've gotten, both from parents of students who are attending, as well as some of our older students as well, who are really reporting, like, now this is the first time since March where I feel like I'm able to focus and to learn. So we continue to train our staff who are working with our students. We continue to kind of have that strong partnership between our teachers who are supporting the staff to support the students as well. But we're really pleased to be able to offer so many students that LASD Plus opportunity. I believe we have maybe one more additional staffing that we're trying to get up and running, but I believe we are serving the majority of students who kind of were at the highest need within all of our school sites. Anything to add on that, Jeff?
Nope. Sandra, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
Is that running this week? as well? Or did that?
We do not. Monica, correct me if I'm wrong, but we said no students on campus this week. We may have some of our staff who are bringing their own children into their classroom to teach on campus if that's more feasible for them, but we do not have any childcare or LASD on campus programs happening, but we did talk about having our LASD plus supervisors, learning folks to really connect with our students as much as possible during this week, because we know this is the most challenging version of learning for them. Next slide, Marcy. So I did want to bring to you, and looking forward a little bit as well. I know I've spoken that it has been a challenge this year, really to understand kind of the progress update of how our students are doing academically. I am committed to doing some report card comparison work over the next week, but did want to share with you some of the pieces that we are putting into place. So we have been working, Greg Drummond out of my office, worked with a team of principals to develop student level data. It's not a dashboard, data overview. So as our principals are working with their guiding coalition leadership teams to really identify student by student, what is the data that we have available in a common manner, which we actually have quite a bit of common student level data, and needed to find a more, just an easier way to collect that data for our teams, our guiding coalitions, our professional learning community teams to be able to look at to see how are students performing, where do we need to be doing some reteaching. So that's one piece that is just getting up and running. I also wanted to let you know that between now, December and January, we've asked our teachers who are now working in person with students to go back to our old Fontes and Pinnell reading benchmark assessment. One of our struggles is we haven't had apples to apples data comparisons. So this will allow us to really look to see how students are performing based on that expected growth by grade levels. So in December and January, all of our in-person students, each and every student will be assessed on the reading benchmark assessment. So we look forward to bringing that data to you in February. For our virtual school students, we are using another tool that we feel like has pretty good data, that valid data. So we won't compare that to F&P exactly, but we will have a good sense of how students participating in our virtual school program are doing with their reading. So we will come to you in February. And then you may or may not have heard this through your CSBA and different groups, but we are expecting right now, as of today, we are expecting this spring to have what is being called a short form Smarter Balanced CAS assessment in just ELA and math. It's supposed to be very short. The state has not given a lot of details about how they will use that data, how reliable that data may be. As you can imagine, there are a lot of questions from educators around how are we going to give this assessment. We have in person, we have a lot of our students, as you know, at home. Typically, our Smarter Balance assessment is given through a secure browser on our devices. We have many families at home using their own devices. So the state has a lot of unanswered questions at this point, but from what we know, as of today, we are expecting that short form Smarter Balance in the springtime. So I think I have a webinar on that in January when we return to get a little bit more detail. And then on the next slide here, I thought some actual data that we do have from this year might be interesting to look at. And this is from our sixth graders. So you will remember, the end of last year, we were really unable to do any of our typical springtime testing. So about a month or so into the school year, we asked all of our sixth graders to take a new assessment for us, the MDTP, the Math Diagnostic Testing. I just lost the P. whatever it is, but it's out of UC San Diego. It's a long time test development center for mathematics. And this is one of their newer assessments. They are probably most well known for their algebra readiness assessment. And so they've been expanding their repertoire. So we had all of our sixth graders take the initial test, which was the sixth grade readiness test. This test was testing how proficient are they on their fifth grade standards. So we tested them at the beginning of sixth grade to see how well prepared are they for sixth grade math. And you can see those students who met the critical levels, which was kind of the minimum threshold to be prepared for sixth grade. Students who performed well on this initial sixth grade readiness test then were invited to take the seventh grade readiness test, which is the second measure that we used for placement into our advanced math course. But I did want to say Karen Wilson, our STEM coordinator, is working with sixth grade teachers, I think maybe this Wednesday, but they've been talking about really diving into this data to understand, you know, you can see here decimals, fractions, and integers. Those areas that we want to pay more attention to, as we might need to do some refresher before we get into that sixth grade material. So it is a great tool with really great student level data reports for teachers to be able to get some information and to use that information to impact what they're doing with students. Next slide. So from those students, thank you, from those students who took the next seventh grade math readiness test, we were able to make our sixth grade math placement. And again, this is not comparing the same test because in the last few years, we've used iReady as one of our big measures along with the MARS assessment, neither of which we were able to give in the spring. But with these two measures through MDTP, you can see here that we had actually more students than we've had in the past qualify for our CC 6-7, more advanced math pathway. It fluctuates each and every year just based on the particular cohort of students. But it does let us know that we had a large number of students who were showing their readiness for seventh grade math, which is really terrific after a springtime of pandemic emergency remote teaching, that they were still really prepared for rigorous seventh grade mathematics. Let's see, I think that might be all about that slide. Do I have a next slide? You want to talk a little bit about this one, Jeff?
Sure. This is just a reminder of all of the practices and procedures we have in place to ensure safety on campus. And these are the things that we want to make sure we adhere to in order to ensure that safety. So next slide. And this one is just a reminder of the next slide. There you go. This one is just a reminder of the transition dates, switch dates that we have in place leading up to the next two changes in placement during the year, January 20th and March 29th. So with that, we'll turn it back over to you, Shelley.
Shelley, you're muted.
Sorry. You'd think by now I'd know how to use Zoom. Okay. Are there any questions from our board members regarding the presentation? Steve?
I just had one on when we were talking about protocols of teachers and staffing levels fluctuating. We talked a lot about you don't feel well, the protocol doesn't work, go get tested, we wait for test results. Are we, and then I will get to a question that makes sense eventually, but the thought is we haven't seen those result in COVID positivity, it's just unnecessarily, because that would be reported on our dashboard. So while we're seeing a rise in people being ill and staying out and going through the protocol to make sure they're safe, reality is that that hasn't had a huge bump in COVID positive outcomes. Is that correct?
That's an accurate statement. Yes.
Thank you. It just seemed a little vague in how we reported it. I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a couple questions. One along the lines of what Steve was asking. Actually, it's how many cases in total have we had across the district?
Monica, do you have that?
I think it's under 10.
Okay, under 10, thank you. And then along the lines of, I don't know what slide number it is now. I think it's probably slide 3, where you're asking for us to start, or the staff's recommending that we start January 11th after the break. Is that correct? You said.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the number is 10.
10, sorry. Oh, the number is 10? Okay, yes. Why are we settling on January 11th, say, instead of maybe a, say, 2-week incubation period after break, which would be all said and done January 20th as to when we would start back up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. We are looking at projection of illnesses and absences really for staff and the trend, and the week of the 4th of January is as far as we wanted to go with that at this point in time, right? We're already talking about 3 weeks out with that, and understanding what the numbers are going to be that far out is challenging, but we definitely see an upward slope on those. And we also know that it's to get the information that we're switching, kind of as I think Ricky indicated when he gave his comments. Thank you, Ricky. That we recognize that the switch from one format to the other is a really heavy lift for everyone, right? For teachers particularly. How we deliver instruction in person is different than the way we deliver instruction remotely. And that being said, we need to protect the health and safety of everyone involved. So it's a delicate balance. So Jessica, the answer is really we're not projecting that far out with this at this point in time. Not sure we could project out for 4 weeks.
No, I understand for now. I'll hear what everybody else has to say.
Yeah, and that being said, I understand that the numbers are trending where they're trending in the county, right? So I think an argument could just as easily be made that we know they're going to be high, right? Come the week of January 11th, maybe. Not sure.
Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether the recommendation to not be in person the January 4th, does that include LASD plus, or would we restart LASD plus on the 4th?
So the current thinking is that it would not include LASD plus, but we could actually give that some thought because we could resource that specifically, right?
Sorry, I wasn't. When you say not include LASD plus?
So I think our initial thinking is that it would not include LASD plus, but
push.
But as we think about that, we could divert all of our resources to that, right? And have that in person. So we can look at that.
Okay, any other board questions on Jeff's presentation? Okay, we will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. I see we have a couple hands up already. Marcy, would you like to call on people?
Yeah, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. Our first speaker is Roberta Pine.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, happy holidays. I want to, you can hear me, I assume. Yes. I want to applaud the safety measures that are in place. I am currently a hybrid teacher at Oak in 3rd grade and have been doing so for the last month. My kids and I have been following all the safety protocols, but this week has been a challenge. Should I say this past weekend, with all of us flipping. So I appreciate acknowledging how hard that was for us to make that flip. I just want to reiterate, it is taking a toll on teachers and students as well, having to flip into this situation. And it's time consuming. People spent hours this weekend tweaking the learning plan. We've been thinking outside the box, like Sandra's asked us to do, and how can we deliver in-person instruction and the hybrid version for the kids at home. And we love teaching in person, most of us. I know we do. The kids love it. It's been social emotional high for all of us. However, there are some bad habits that they've learned that are hard to break. And distance is a consistent, high quality, full-time instruction. Our district is delivering a full day, no matter what we are doing, hybrid or distance. And very few districts are doing that. I am thrilled to see that you are considering staying distance for that first week back in January, but I would push that you would remain at least 2 weeks, if not through January 25th, and then reconsider your start dates for the 4th, 5th, just barely got started. They need more time to come back and introduce those protocols again. And then 6th might be pushed back as well. And then I just want you to be realistic. You're right. It's the cold and flu season. We need to make sure that we have our staff to help the kids, to help everybody succeed. It does become a bit of a domino effect when you have to call in those symptoms. And before my time is up, I just want to really reiterate how fabulous a job our principals are doing. They have gone above and beyond. And without them, if they're not on campus, I think things would truly fall apart. So I really appreciate all that the administration has been doing, but really, truly give a serious consideration of pushing and putting the pause button on for longer, please. And make sure that we can deliver a high quality instruction. And if we can plan this Wednesday for January and know that that's what we're going to go do, we will really put our heart and soul into it like we always do. We're giving 1,000% this year. And I just want you to know that we care. And we also want to be safe and healthy and be with our loved ones. So thank you for listening, and please consider changing the start dates.
Okay, thank you, Roberta.
Our next speaker is Tal Shalin.
Hi, Tal and Dari Shalom. We have 4 children in the district. Appreciate everything that's been said, and we understand the need to protect the teachers and the students and the staff. However, I think it's a matter of prioritization. I can just tell you from our experience, our 4 children are quite miserable at home. They're not enjoying the distance learning at all. Our 4th grader was super happy to go into the blended program just to get that shut down on him. And it's taking a huge emotional toll on our children. The fact that 80% of the parents want to go back to school and send their kids back to school should be the highest priority of the district to support and serve the children that want to go back to school, and not have discussions about delaying things, especially when you start to benchmark Los Altos against neighboring school districts such as Menlo Park, who's been open since September. Charter Bullis has been open. Private schools are open. They're getting quality education. And all we've been hearing here is let's delay another couple of weeks. Let's delay it until the end of January. And no one's paying attention or respecting the demands and the requests of the parents and the children to open the schools. And I think we should just take a look around us and see that other school districts are doing it successfully. And Los Altos certainly should have the priority and the resources to do that. And it's quite frustrating to be hearing discussions about why we should delay opening further. So that's our point, and I wish you take that into consideration.
Great, thank you, Tal. Do you have any more speakers? Okay. All right, thank you. Would any board members at this time like to provide comment on this agenda item? Brian?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I understand the arguments on both sides. I do think if we can start LASD Plus back on January 4th, we should try. I mean, those are the kids, as Sandra commented, you know, who are struggling the most in a distance setting. And since we operated LASD Plus sort of, you know, before for grades, before we got those kids back on campus, it does seem like we should be able to do it, even if we're in a larger pause for a week. I can see the logic in pushing the start back to January 11th, especially now that the quarantine guidance has been reduced to 10 days. January 11th is 10 days after January 1st. So, you know, given that there's inevitably some travel, both in with our families and I'm sure with some of our staff as well, I can see the threshold there. You know, I just want to make sure that we're confident that we're going to have a plan starting January 11th that is going to keep us on campus as much as possible. So, you know, I don't want this to be, I'm a little concerned that it's, you know, a toehold into indefinite delay. And I think that would be a real shame, as everybody's commented, there's kids and staff who really want to be back on campus, and we should make that happen. And we should make sure that we've got a plan that's going to be resilient to the kind of, you know, absences that we know that we're going to see, given that we're essentially being zero tolerance this year on coughs and other non-COVID illnesses, keeping staff out. So I think that's my overall comments.
Anyone else want to comment? Steve?
So the only other thing I would ask is if we are closing that 4th, if we could somehow ramp availability of testing, well, for staff, so everyone gets tested coming back in as a protocol, versus the way we've been doing with El Camino Hospital, so that we have a baseline of knowing that walking in and out of the holidays, they were feeling okay about things. I think that would be helpful. And expanding that availability of testing to students would be helpful too, I think, just to make everyone's reading level higher. I get what Brian's saying, that you know, we were asking people to stay home from, well, no matter what your symptoms are. But if we know coming in that they're in better shape than we were going out, maybe we could open a little more, with a little more wiggle room, in my mind anyway. I know I've been tested a lot because of the weird traveling I've been doing. And so it just kind of reduces my anxiety about spreading things around. And so just kind of like working that into people's mindset. The other thing I would ask is it's going to, for us to be able to do this successfully, it's going to require families to maybe do the holidays differently than you have traditionally done them. So thinking about a communication before the end of the school year, before we go into the holidays, about perhaps some different protocols and how to approach the holidays differently. Knowing that if we really want to maintain this reopening schedule, it might mean it's a different break than you've traditionally done. I was listening to some things on the radio, and it's like, you know, the idea that with the vaccine coming online, that the reality is maybe by next school year, life will be a little back to what we consider to be normal, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. And we need to alter our behavior if we want to maintain live delivery of classes with kids in classrooms. And so just kind of getting that word out to, and making sure people really understand what we're looking for in order to make this work. It's a prioritization of education for the families as well. So it's a mixture of both. I know the staff is working that direction, long hours, all those other unfortunate things we've been asking them to do, but it's families behaving differently too. So we can make sure that this really does stay open, and we are able to Brian's point, if we do open on the 11th, that we are open until the next break, which is in February sometime, or I think. So it's like, keeping that is the priority for everybody is going to be required for this to actually work, I think.
Jessica or Vladimir? Jessica?
Along the lines of what Steve said, we definitely need a strong communication about if we were to go with January 11th instead of, say, January 20th. It has to be a strong communication that they should be home for at least 10 days, not having traveled, not hanging out with anybody they see fit. In order to go back. And this is staff and children and families. We need this to be safe, and we need this to be consistent. We need to go back normal, as normal as we can this year. I know that our whole district has been working really hard to keep us following these protocols. And I know that it was a really difficult decision made on Friday to close for this week. We want in-person classes. I have a 5th grader. She would have liked to have been in school this week. She has been suffering at home. And, as a parent, I've been suffering having her at home. I love her to death. Anyway, so I really, while I would prefer January 20th because of the 2 weeks after the break, if we were to get a communication out this week, really pressing upon everybody that we're doing this together and we have to we have to follow these rules, not asking them, telling them we have to. I'm for that.
Vladimir? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah. Again, echoing Steve and Jessica, Jeff, there was some while back, there was talk of a contract that we would ask parents to sign, which would lay out the expected behavior. And although I understand that students, many students are suffering, I think that if we end up with a number of COVID cases amongst the student population, that's worse than the suffering that we have now. So if we are going to go back into blended learning, then we have to have everybody do their part, which is not to travel, for instance. The other comment I'd like to make is that we've decided a long time ago that we would rely on the best advice we possibly can, the scientific advice from the county and from the state as to what is safe to do and what is not safe to do. I understand that schools and students, the rules, if you want, of safety are different than for the general population. But we are under a stay-at-home order. We are in the purple zone. Nationally, our COVID cases are rising. And I hope that the lockdowns that have been put into place are going to cause us to diminish, but I don't know when that's going to happen. So until it happens, we need to do our part, and that's not travel this this Christmas.
Thank you. So I agree with my fellow board members that we are in partnership, our parents and teachers together, if we want our kids to be back on campus safely. And, January 11th makes sense to me because, like Brian says, it's 10 days after January 1st.
Smartphone disconnected.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what that is. Okay.
Smartphone connected.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I don't know how to turn that off. Anyway, so I think, whether we choose January 4th, 10th, the 20th, we need to keep in mind what the quarantine period is, and parents need to plan to make sure they quarantine before whatever that first day back on campus is. And I heard my fellow board members talk about a communication that can go out. One thing that I'd like to see in that communication, and I'm sure we've done this before, is testing resources for our parents. Just like a list of where you can go get tested, or websites just to make it absolutely easy, that if you suspect anything, go get tested, and here's where you can go. And I also want to agree with Vladimir about we have been consistently following data-driven, the science that the county has been putting out. And I really, really think it's important that we stay consistent, that we don't keep switching around to following these guidelines and then 2 weeks we'll follow some other guidelines. We've been doing a really good job with the guidelines we've been following. So I'd really like to see us stay consistent with that. All right, that's it. Vladimir.
Add something about the following the science. The county and the state are the people who have the most knowledge about pandemics and how they proceed and what the good things to do and what the bad things to do are. And we don't have that particular knowledge. So depending on them for guidance is, I think, absolutely the right thing to do.
Thank you, Vladimir.
Smartphone disconnected.
Any other? Sorry about the smartphone thing. I won't even. It's my husband's desk, and he's got weird things going on his desk. All right, I'm going to move us along now. Agenda item I2, first interim financial report. Mr. Kenyon will present the 2020-21 first interim financial report for review and approval. Mr. Kenyon, and I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Shali. We can go to the next slide, Marcy. This is just a section header slide giving you introduction and overview. We'll start with those slides. Just 2 comments about the first slide. This is the first time that we've given you an update on the projections for the current year since our adopted budget in June. Okay, so this is the 6 months later, we're talking about what this year looks like. And secondly, we can, based on the projections, meet our financial obligations, both for the current year and 2 future years as required by the state. So I'll be recommending that we make a positive certification on our first interim financial report. Next slide, Marcy. 2 key overview comments. We are pretty sound financially this year, and it's going to be difficult. It's difficult trying to project next year. We just don't know exactly what the impacts of the COVID pandemic will be. So uncertainty is kind of the watchword that I use to describe looking forward past this year. You can see that our reserves are projected to grow to around 14% by the end of this year. So next slide, please. So as we look at the overview, just comparing our revenues, our expenses, and our reserves now as compared to back in June when we adopted the budget, you can see that both revenues and expense projections are higher. But our fund balance is growing significantly, and our reserves have grown to almost 14%. What's important for you to understand a little bit in the notes at the bottom, we restricted our ending general fund balance by about $1 million, back in June, because it was uncertain whether or not the state was going to impose very draconian cuts to state funding that could also impact us. So we restricted part of our ending balance by that amount to come up with our unrestricted ending fund balance of 1.7 million. Correspondingly, but also those cuts did not materialize, right? So we did not need to suffer those that $1 million loss, potential $1 million loss in our revenues. But we do have a reason to restrict some money in the fund balance, in our fund balance at the end, at this point in time. It appears that we will be spending, I'm estimating about $600,000 more on COVID-related expenses compared to the amount of funding we get. So if we go to the next slide, just kind of show you that. This slide shows you the various grants that we're getting that are COVID related, and they total about 1.8 million. Our projected expenses, though, for COVID related are about 2.4 million. So this difference we're setting aside as a restriction on our ending fund balance at this point. So next slide. We're talking about sort of comparing revenues and expenses from June to now. You can see the growth in revenues primarily due to mostly these items here. Some of them are offsetting both on the revenue and the expense side. So the grant money from COVID and the premium on our trans tax and revenue anticipation notes are both offset by equal expense increases on the expenditure side. But lottery funding projection is about $500,000 more now than it was in June. I gave very conservative lottery projections back in June. Based on information from Sacramento, it looks like the lottery funding will be close to normal. And so that's a huge jump in the lottery projections. The other major change has to do with property tax revenues. So I want to talk about that real briefly. Our current estimated tax revenues are actually greater than they were in June by about 1%, about $500,000. The growth from last year is about 6% at this point. It was projected to be 5% back in June. That growth is offset by an increase in the transfer to the charter school. And that increase is due to the state not implementing the per student funding cuts that they were proposing of 10% back in June. That never materialized. So our June budget was based on those cuts, which would reduce the funding level to the charter school. Since those did not materialize, the funding level goes up for the charter school, which increases our transfer, which decreases our net property tax revenues. Next slide. On the expense side, again, we have some offsets to the revenues. The COVID one-time costs related to COVID, the TRAN. And then additionally, we have program manager monies unspent that are carried forward into the current year, about $900,000. And then there's a myriad of cost avoidance of about $1.3 million in a variety of different areas. And I just indicate a few of them on the slide here. So next slide, moving on. In terms of looking at our other funds, not just the general fund, two of our special funds, basically no change from adopted budget to now, but our building fund and our capital facilities fund have increased fund balances, and you can see the reasons why compared to what we were looking at back in June. Next slide, Marcy. So now moving on to not just the current year, but looking at a multi-year projection. Spend a little time on that. As you know, the state requires us to make a projection for the current year plus 2 future years. And in our base case scenario, our reserves are projected to remain in double digits throughout the 3-year period. So clearly we could meet all of our financial obligations. We also have a longer forecast, in this case, a 5-year forecast. Our reserves start to decline by the end of that forecast, and we'll talk a little bit about the assumptions that underpin the forecast, and that will, in large part, be responsible for that decline. You'll also note from this slide that if we apply an annual cost of living salary increase in the 2 to 3% range, then our reserves drop below the state required 3% level as early as the 3rd year out. Next slide, Marcy. So let's talk about some of the key assumptions in the multi-year projection. First and foremost, property tax growth. I have not changed the assumption here since June. And it was a very, I would say it's a pretty conservative assumption that we'll have zero growth for the next 2 years. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get further into the slides. And then a gradual return to a more normal situation of growth at the 4% level for the couple of years after that. And just know that 4%, our historical, recent historical growth average has been in the 6 to 7% range. So 4 is still a conservative projection. Let's talk a little bit about the transfer to the charter school for the students that attend there. The projection is assuming a fixed enrollment based on their highest projection of, I think it's a little over 1,100 students. And we're projecting that for next year and for the out years. And we are also projecting, because our consultants in Sacramento School Services are recommending as part of first interim that there will be no COLA, no cost of living adjustment in revenues for the next several years from the state. So we're using that assumption as one of our assumptions in our first interim report. If there is an increase in the per student funding, either a COLA increase or some additional funding, our transfer will go up. Likewise, if there are more students, our transfer of property taxes will go up. Our COVID grants, again, they will go away next year. We're looking at, sorry, I'm just pausing here a second to move my stuff that's in the way of the slides. I'm assuming that as part of the first interim as part of the assumptions, is that pretty much we go back to normal next year, that COVID does not impact financially us beyond this year. And therefore, I look back not to 1920, but to 1819 as a base for future projections. You'll recall last year, 1920, there was a significant change in the spring because of COVID, and that resulted in some revenue losses and some expenditure reductions or increases, depending on what line item category we're talking about. So it made more sense to look back for a base case to 1819. So just so you know, that's part of our assumptions. No increase in special ed revenues, no major change in expenses other than some natural growth that we see every year. So next slide, Marcy. Lottery will fluctuate. It's based on average daily attendance, but our projections, again, based on school services recommendations, is the same dollars per student in the future years as in current years. We're projecting a drop in foundation funding to 2.5 million to be conservative, based on some early information from the foundation in their thinking. Of course, the parcel tax is a flat amount. The transfer to BCS will vary depending upon their share of the total enrollment. And in terms of some of our local revenue sources, rents and lease income and use fees. So we look back to the 18-19 kind of as the base year when we had, a full year of rental income and a full year of use fees to project out to the future. So I think that's the end of the revenue projection assumptions. Let's go to the next slide and start talking about expense assumptions. Relatively flat. There is projected some growth, but not a huge amount of growth. We saw a huge drop in enrollment this year, but we're not expecting to go all the way back during this 5-year forecast. Looks like growth of about 200 students, I'm projecting, and the number of teachers to grow by 7 over the course of 5 years to the 4th year from now. Where will we get growth? Well, we expect some return of students who have left for one reason or another during this pandemic year. we have some new housing stock coming online, and housing turnover. Typically in the past, older folks will sell homes and families will come in with students. So we expect some growth from any and all of those three areas, but we will have some decline due to larger exiting 8th grade cohorts compared to smaller incoming kindergarten cohorts. So there's an offset to whatever growth we're seeing on the other categories. We'll talk a little bit more about enrollment in a second. In terms of other costs, our substitute teacher costs, we're expecting to increase. We've had lower costs this year as we have perhaps more absences and more in-service training for teachers. We'll expect substitute teacher costs to go up. All one-time expenses such as carryover monies, COVID grant monies we expect to go away in future years. Marcy, next slide. Importantly, the projections do not include any across-the-board raises in the current year and future years in our baseline forecast. We'll talk about variations on that assumption. Health insurance rate increases are projected now at 7.5% annual growth. Back in June, and for a couple of years, we've been projecting 5% growth, but we have a rate increase this year, effective January 1 of close to 8%. So we're projecting that 7.5% going forward. Additionally, certainly with the COVID pandemic, expect medical costs generally going up, perhaps a little bit faster than they have in the most recent years. Finally, all these assumptions are being shared. They haven't been shared yet with our Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance. They will be shared at our next meeting. And we've talked about some of them already, but they needed to be vetted by that group, just so you know. Next slide, Marcy. So this is just a picture of the enrollment. So when I said it was relatively flat, looking at the decline from last year to this year, and what it looks like going forward based upon a bunch of different assumptions. And next slide. This is what the reserves trend looks like under the baseline. Again, you see the growth this year and next year in the 13 to 14% range, and then the decline due to that 0% property tax growth for 2 years, which markedly starts to begin to eat away at our reserves. Next slide. So here's a what if scenario. If we gave annual cost of living raises around 2%, which is around the CPI measurement for the next several years, plus or minus a few base points. You can see what happens to our reserve level. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about property tax growth going forward. I know this is hard to see, but this is a slide I've shared pretty much at every financial update I've given. And you can see if you look closely that the growth in assessed value for properties in the district, it's an ongoing assessed value roll, and that roll gets changed month to month as we head towards the July 1 date, which sets the assessed value for next year. So you can see it's kind of a light green color. You can see the current year, fiscal 2021. We have data through December, start of December. And you can, if you can find it, you know, the trajectory is pretty typical, but you see us in December, just a little bit above 4%, 4.25% right now. But just like the fiscal year 2014, which has a note and an arrow pointing to it, the county system automatically adds 2% to the growth at the start of the year based on that inflation factor. That is the maximum that is allowed AV to grow in any 1 year, 2%. And typically it grows at least that amount, or the inflation is at least that amount. So there typically is a 2% growth just because of that inflation every year. That was not the case during the Great Recession. In hitting fiscal year 2014, the growth was less than 0.5%. So there was a decline from December to January when the county took the 2% away and applied the 0.45% inflation factor. Well, this year going forward is going to be another year where the inflation factor is going to be less than 2%. So it looks like right now it's going to be maybe around 1%. So we need to be thinking, originally I thought it might be as low as 0, but as we get closer, the county's indicating it might be around 1%. And they will know that in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to have a decline from the December number to the January number. So let's just go to the next slide and I can talk about that a little bit more. So here I've just shown you historically where we've been in terms of tax roll growth from December to July 1. And we continue to grow every year as the months go forward. But back in 2014, fiscal year 2014, that growth of a little over 4% really needs to be knocked down by 1.5%. So it was a little bit less than 3% in reality compared to all these other bars. Now our current fiscal year, it shows us about 4.25, and that really should drop down to about 3.25. Okay, similar, a little bit higher than where we were at this point last year. Okay, so we are expecting roll growth. We have roll growth. In addition to the 2%, we have a roll growth for the current year. So in addition to the inflation factor, we have roll growth for the current year. So moving forward, it looks like we will have some roll growth next year. That translates into property tax growth is a different question because there is a number of possibilities that could affect the property taxes, such as roll corrections, where assessed values are reversed or reduced by appeals throughout the county, or there could be significant delinquencies in terms of people paying taxes that could affect us. So let's move on. I've talked enough about the assessed value and roll growth. So that's pretty much the projections. I want to talk a little bit about going forward in terms of the uncertainties that we're facing. This is a very different year than any other year in the years that I've been in this district, which is over 30. So difficult to really project what the actual impact of the pandemic will be going forward. Will we be able to return to what we thought was normal as we go into the upcoming year? And what does that mean for our financials? So I've highlighted some of what I think are the key areas on the next few slides. So Marcy, slide 23. In terms of property tax revenues, again, will our assessed values continue to increase, and at what rate? Not only for next year, but the year after and the year after that. And will the county maintain its commitment to the teeter plan? In other words, fully funding what the assessed taxes are and not impose any reduction due to delinquencies and payments. In terms of state funding, the state budget picture is looking much better than it was in June. And they have additional revenues. In large part, that's due to personal income tax increases, tax increases for the state, largely due to capital gains. So will this trend continue? The picture at the state budget level is looking much rosier than it was. Of course, some of that's due to the deferrals that they imposed. So we'll see how that plays out. Next slide. Will we be able to get back to more normal levels of rental income, lease income, use fee income? If things go back to normal where our tenants are able to resume operations at 100%, that'll certainly increase our rental and lease income, as well as all of our facility users. And of course, the challenges that both the foundation and PTA face in terms of fundraising is a key issue. On the expense side, next slide, Marcy. Will the charter school keep growing? That will increase the transfer that we will need to make to the charter school. Again, will there be annual COLAs on the per student funding or other increases that will have an impact on our finances? What about enrollment growth? If it grows higher than projected, will we need to increase staffing to accommodate the growth? Or will we have enough teachers already because of how they fall out from class to class cohort and schools, so that we don't need to increase as many? Importantly, what's the lasting impact? What's the lasting learning loss impact due to the pandemic? Will that require additional expenditures as we look forward? Next slide. What about medical insurance rates? They could certainly get higher and higher due to the long-lasting effects of the pandemic. You know that we've had increases in our employer contributions for state retirement systems, but the investment arena is doing quite well now. So will pension fund investments get enough gains to enable them to actually reduce employer contributions going forward? Or will we continue to see increases in that area? Finally, we've made some investments during this pandemic, typically using COVID funding grant money. And we may want to continue or need to continue some of those investments. So we've obviously had to increase our technology infrastructure because of the distance learning situation. I don't know if we've talked about it here, but we've been working with the PTA leadership over the last couple of years, developed a 5-year technology plan. So far, been able to fund the beginning of that 5-year plan with existing resources, but we may need to spend additional resources going forward. And as you know, we've had to look at our facilities in order to make them the safest we possibly could during this pandemic. So including our heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems, we've had to make some adjustments. We're looking at new filtrations for them. Some of them are older. So I'm in the process of developing a 5-year plan for our facilities, particularly for our HVAC systems, to share with you as part of our facilities master plan. So I'm working with the architect and our engineering consultants on that because I think we want to upgrade a number of those systems. So next slide, Marcy. So that's all the background. As we move, next slide, into the conclusions. Next slide, Marcy. I'm going to recommend that you approve the first interim financial report as presented. Next slide. And we just have this every time, a reminder of what's coming next in terms of formal presentation to the board. In January, we will have the information on the governor's proposal for the state budget for the upcoming year. I noticed we have this is somewhat a slide from last year. We had a budget study session last January. We may or may not have that this coming year. And then in March, we do our second interim financial report on the current year projections. And then we lead into June with the LCAP and budget adoption. In the next 2 slides, Marcy, I think. Okay. Just a reminder in terms of, yeah, thank you. Well, the multi-year projection basically rolls forward the current year programs. I've identified some of the differences from current year to next year in terms of revenue expenses and the assumptions under the multi-year projection. But just want to remind you that carryovers are one-time expenses and not carried forward, and other one-time revenues or expenses such as COVID are not carried forward into the upcoming year. So when you see a decline sometimes on the revenue and expense side, why is that? That doesn't make sense. Well, that's because there's one-time monies in the current year. The multi-year projection has not been vetted yet by the Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance. And the final slide is the eye test slide, where you get to look at the sort of the summary of the multi-year projection, both some of the key variables and the numbers, and you either zoom your screen to a more readable level or you do your eye test here. So that's the presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. Again, I'm recommending that you approve the first interim as presented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Randy. Does the board have any questions regarding Randy's presentation? Jessica?
Mine are quick questions. On the property tax growth assumption, you have 0% for next year. Where did you get your assumptions from? What did you work off of for that?
So again, I'm using the same assumptions that we had back in June when it looked like there were going to be certainly severe state funding cuts, and it was clearly unknown what our projections would be for assessed value growth for the future years. I've wanted to remain conservative at first interim time, just because it's pretty unclear what's going to happen next year. I will say that I've checked with my colleagues throughout the county that are also basic aid districts. And we are certainly one of the ones that are on the low end, but most of the districts are projecting, 0 to 4% growth, depending on the district. Districts that might have more resources, I think the high school district is projecting higher than we are. So purposely remaining conservative, Jessica. There's no data from the county. The county does not make projections. They will provide updates on the current year projected tax revenues, but nothing for the future.
Okay.
So that was a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
It's okay. And the other one having to do with the assessed value. How is that determined in that? What do we rely on? Is it a county-wide thing or is it local to Los Altos?
So assessed value roll is local to Los Altos. Okay. So that's our property value growth that you're seeing on those slides that show the AV growth.
Okay.
What does happen countywide is when there are roll corrections, when people, typically these are rollbacks, where properties are reduced because somebody's saying, oh, my property isn't valued as much, or the county automatically will reduce them because market rates are down, which happened during the Great Recession. They automatically reduced assessed values on properties. So those are applied countywide. The impact of those are applied countywide and prorated across all districts for 1 year. And then the impact is just local based on that the properties that live within our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ryan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I just the $600,000 that you've kind of set aside as reserve money for COVID expenses over the revenues. What does that consist of?
So that's overage on all the expenses we've made on COVID. So there's not one particular thing. We've invested in staff. We've added custodial staff. We've added staff for LASD Plus, as you know. We've added, we have a virtual school, so that's increased our staffing there. We've added PPE equipment. We've added supplies and materials. So there's a whole bunch of expenses that we've incurred related to COVID. And the total of those looks to me like they're going to outstrip the revenues we're getting from the grants. So so it's really encroaching on our funds essentially.
Right, but it doesn't include anything that we might need to do in the future around learning loss mitigation, that kind of thing.
It does not forecast that at this point.
Okay.
Any other questions for Randy? Vladimir?
Yeah, Randy, just one clarifying question on slide 5. the numbers that you show there, they are what our expenditures, our revenues would be at the end of the year, right? Those are projections for the future. They're not numbers that are valid today.
Right, I don't know exactly which slide 5 is. I can guess what it is. And
It's
those are the projections for the whole year, Brian.
Vladimir. Yeah.
Yes, I did correct. Vladimir.
Okay. Then the other thing, the other sort of like fairly big question I have is, well, big question. I was under the impression, and maybe I'm mistaken, that ADA was fixed for this year and perhaps next year as well, or last year and this year, that regardless of what your actual ADA was, you were fixed at the state assumed that you had a fixed ADA. Is that right?
So what you're referring to basically doesn't have a lot to do with us because we're a basic aid district, but for a state funded district, the funding is based on the average daily attendance. And because a number of districts are suffering declines because of the COVID pandemic, the state has put in place a measure to allow districts to be funded on the prior year revenue, prior year average daily attendance instead of the current year. If you are a growing district, there is a mechanism for you to get funded on the growth though.
So the reason I asked the question is because it has to do with the amount of parcel tax money that we sent to BCS. And I thought that was just a fixed amount for these, at least these couple of years, as opposed to varying depending upon ADA. Does that make sense? Maybe I should just talk to you separately.
Yeah, there's only a fix for 1 year. And we can talk about the details of the sharing of the parcel tax. It's pretty simple. Every year there's a calculation of total enrollment. BCS compared to ours as to, each gets a pro rata share based on their percentage of students compared to the total.
Yeah, but I guess my point was that is fixed now. Regardless of what our actual enrollments are, the ones that we use for calculations are fixed. No?
So I don't think for the parcel tax they are. That has nothing to do with what's happening at the state level, Vladimir. Okay. That's our local parcel tax language.
Okay. All right. That's all I need for questions now.
Any other questions for Randy before I take public comment? Okay. Great. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raised hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. And it does not look like we have anyone who wants to give public comment. Okay. Moving right along. Would any board members like to provide further comment on this agenda item? Brian? And then Vladimir.
Yeah, I think maybe these are suggestions, Randy, that I'd love to have you run by CACF when they consider this stuff. I think, there's been a huge educational impact by this year. And so I think maybe for the purpose of future planning, we should be reserving more money for learning loss mitigation efforts. I'd love to see us talk in the spring about running a more full-featured summer school where we can really do more instruction than we've done in summer schools in the past, because we're going to have such a bigger gap to address. Mental health services are going to be a huge deal. So I'd like to sort of get a handle on what kind of one-time monies we think we might need to spend, and then kind of set those aside from our projections, because we sort of see that coming up as one-time expenses over the next year or two. And the other thing I'd like to think about in terms of planning is we've got this big 2% STRS rate increase coming up in a couple of years, where they basically pause the gradual increases for a couple of years to give districts a break, but then they're just going to pile them back on all in one year. And so I'd like to get some advice from CACF about whether we should be setting aside a reserve for that as well, just so we don't kind of get blindsided in that 1 year, facing either a dramatic drop in our unrestricted reserves or getting squeezed on program or something like that. So
Brian, just so you know, the projections incorporate the increase in those STRS rates in the future years already.
right.
But if they're changed, if they become greater, then yeah, we would need to set aside more monies.
Yeah, I know. So it's just
Okay.
a question of, I mean, in some sense, it's just an accounting question and how we look at our unrestricted,
Yeah.
balance and how it fluctuates over time. So I
Okay.
just want to make sure that sort of significant inflection points like that don't get kind of overlooked until we're in
Yeah.
that year and get smacked over the head with them.
Yep.
Vladimir?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to, the first one was a comment about the 13.7% reserve maximum that we're looking at. There was another slide after that that showed our reserves dropping precipitously if we had a 2% cost of living, 2% salary increase year to year. And I would just like to remind people how tenuous it is to have a 13.7% reserve. It can disappear in just 2 years. And so my personal druthers is to have a 20% reserve, because then you basically, you can make it through the entire year without, usually, mostly, hopefully you can make it through an entire year without severe financial loss. But 13.7%, we're just really on the edge there. A question for Randy: do we have? Are we affected by any deferments that the state might impose, or are we just? Is that something that's only for districts that are not community funded?
So we are at most minimally affected. There's not, other than, always the possibility the state might look to basic aid districts for some cash. We're not affected by those currently, Vladimir.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other comment on slide 23, there's the word teeter. I just wanted to remind everybody that that does not mean that our budget is teetering on any edge. Teeter is the name of the person that that put together that plan. So just to make sure that people understand that, that's all. That's all, thanks.
Thank you, Vladimir. Any other comments? All right, I don't have any comments. Thank you so much, Randy, for that very detailed report. Can I please have a motion to approve the first interim financial report as presented?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, is there any further board discussion? Okay, so Vladimir made the motion to approve the first interim financial report as presented. Brian seconded. I will now take a roll call vote. Jessica?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Vladimir?
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Randy. All right, on to our next agenda item. The 2020-21 Local Control Funding Formula, or LCFF, Budget Overview for Parents. The Board of Trustees will consider approving the 2020-21 Local Control Funding Formula, Budget Overview for Parents. Mrs. McGonigal.
All right, thank you. So I am here tonight to just, this first slide is a reminder of a typical school year, what types of plan requirements we have in order to participate in our federal funding. Typically, we have the federal addendum. We have our CONAP, which is our consolidated application that we do each year to file for, to let the federal government know that we want some of our title monies. So our Title I money supports our socioeconomically disadvantaged and at-risk students. Our Title II money is professional development funds. Our Title III money is around English learners and immigrant funding. And so, of course, you all know that at the end of each year, we're required then to have you adopt our plan for the LCAP. But the recent addition to this family of fun is the budget overview for parents. So next slide. For this particular year, because of course it is a kooky year, this year is really looking back at our learning continuity plan and attendance plan that you all adopted at the beginning of the school year. So the purpose of the budget overview for parents is really to provide transparency to parents about how we're using our monies. It is highlighting how we specifically used our money as it relates to our learning continuity and attendance plan. And a big portion of that is how it highlights our commitment to provide services for our unduplicated pupils, or in the budget overview for parents, they call them high needs students. Next slide. So the fantastic Kim Janelli, who works out of Randy's office, she and I use this template that's provided by the state. Kim plugs in the fiscal numbers from our budget into a spreadsheet, and this template is really populated for us, which is outstanding. So each template for each district looks similar, but of course is customized based on the accounting information. So you can see there how we get our revenue by which fund source, how much funds we are using to support our high needs students, as compared to our total budgeted funds there, and how that compares. Next slide. You need to know a couple of things. So this, according to whatever the powers that be, it is available on the website and has to be available for parents because it is all part of that transparency. It aligns to our learning continuity and attendance plan. It really highlights the funding from the CARES Act, those several buckets of funds. And tonight you need to consider adopting the budget overview for parents. I think I have one more slide about what's coming in the future. Do I have one more slide, Marcy? Maybe I don't. Later this year, you will have an LCAP, a new LCAP, a 3-year LCAP, along with another budget overview for parents, which will kind of look at our future LCAP more forward than backwards. So tonight I ask if you have any questions. Randy can answer the financial questions, but as part of the first interim, I'm also asking that you adopt the budget overview for parents.
Thank you, Sandra. Right. Does the board have any questions for Sandra regarding her presentation? Vladimir?
I do. If we go back to that marvelous slide there with the circles.
Yep.
The leftmost one shows total LCFF funds of 46 millions. That really should be labeled property tax money. I'm asking Randy as well. Shouldn't that be labeled property tax money that equals what the state would give us?
So the answer is that in concept is correct. But in terms of this particular template, they're going to always call it LCFF revenue. Yeah, but it's our calculated state guarantee funding under the LCFF formula.
And we meet that guarantee through property tax.
We meet and exceed that guarantee, correct.
Well, okay, all right, that's all I wanted to know. Because I didn't realize that we got $46 million of state funds. We'd be rich then.
As of fun fact there, Vladimir, about this template. There are about 3 sentences that we insert of text into this template. Everything else is their canned template.
All right, thank you.
Right in the middle of page 2 towards the bottom that says how we use the budget expenditures that are not included in the LCAP will be used for the following. So we provide those 2 sentences there. Everything else is a canned part of the template.
All right.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll go on to public comment. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. And I see nobody queuing up for public comment. So public comment is closed. Would any board members like to provide? Does anybody want to comment? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the 2020-21 local control funding formula budget overview for parents as presented?
I move.
Thank you, Vladimir. Can I have a second? Steve?
Yeah.
Is that you? Awesome. Okay. Any further board discussion? Okay. So Vladimir made the motion. Steve seconded it. I will call for, I'll do a roll call vote. Jessica?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Vladimir?
Yes.
Hold us in suspense. I vote yes. Motion passes unanimously. Yay. Okay. Thank you so much, Sandra. Appreciate it. We will now move on to agenda item J, board and administration comments. This time is for the board administration to report on non-agenda items such as committee reports, school activities, legislation, and future agendas. Who would like to start? Randy, please.
I don't often get the chance to go first. Next week, we have our quarterly Citizens Oversight Committee. This is our Bond Oversight Committee meeting next Wednesday, 5 p.m. on a virtual meeting. And just wanted to let the board know that you'll be receiving a mid-year report from Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance, either the last meeting in January or February meeting. So just be aware that you will get a report from them with their findings and recommendations as of mid-year.
Thank you. Look forward to that. Sandra?
I don't know that I have anything. I've been very busy attending county webinars and state webinars on assessment as the county and state are trying to make their decisions about the future. I do want to give a huge shout out to our teachers. Karen and Greg from my department continue to meet with each grade level on a monthly basis to just double check on their pacing, to share some best practices, to see if the CNI office can help teachers in any way with their curricular needs. So I know that my team finds that really valuable, and I know the feedback from our teachers has been great around that too. That's it for me.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
I don't have anything else to add. Shelley?
Excellent. I'm just gonna go across my screen. So Jessica?
I went to the Covington new parent kinder info night, which was held on Zoom. I thought went very well. Not only was the presentation great, but also a good repartee with Wade and the kinder teachers answering questions of the attendees. And I think having the Zoom situation allowed more people to attend, and also more people help answer questions through chat and whatnot. I liked that venue for this specific thing. I think it's nice to be in person too, but perhaps a hybrid in the future for this would be great. Last week or the week before we had CSBA, I forget.
The week before.
I'm like, I have really no idea. I attended some of the sessions, really not the same. I had Zoom fatigue or whatever. They were pre-recorded, so I don't recommend the way it went down. I look forward to in person in the future. But it is what it is. And today I actually was in a meeting with Mark Berman. He just wanted to hear about how all the different schools districts are dealing, what our challenges, what our successes were. What I can report out is that we're not the only ones having staffing issues. Literally all the issues we're having, people in Assembly District 24, school districts in Assembly District 24 are also having the same issues we are. And we're doing similar things. Our LASD plus, they call a learning hub somewhere else. So we're all doing great things. And do let me know if you want me to pass anything on to Berman. He did mention he really will always continue to push for education funding as much as he can, especially in these COVID times. We need to push him past that too. We always need the funding. Anyway, so that's it.
Great, thank you. Brian?
Nothing really to report. I've been attending the Santa Clara County Public Health Department's calls for elected officials on a fairly regular basis. But I don't think anything out of that we haven't heard through other channels.
Great, thank you. Steve?
Just a request, as we've now gone through a cycle with virtual learning school, maybe some sort of feedback on that would be interesting to hear, because I have a fairly decent grasp on what we're doing with hybrid, but it'd be nice to hear what's going on with virtual and how that's working at some point, not right away, but at some point.
Okay. Vladimir?
I too went to the CSBA conference virtually, and I'm collecting sort of my thoughts and presentations and stuff like that, and I'll post them for. Jessica started a Google Doc for that. And let's see what else. I think that's about it so far.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, I too joined my fellow board members at CSBA. I completely echo the air quotes and it wasn't the same. No, it really wasn't. There's so much more that you get out of that conference besides the sessions. I did attend the board president's training, so that was really helpful. Glad I did that. Today, I attended the LASD Equity Task Force's first meeting, and that was really good. The think tank meeting is tomorrow. We've kind of spent most of our time today talking about equity and developing norms for our group and what it means for us. But I think that group is going to do some really great work. Before I adjourn, I want to thank Brian for his leadership this past year. Like I said before, really big shoes to fill. And yeah, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Brian. And I wish everybody a safe and happy December break. This meeting is adjourned. Okay, look.
Good job, Valley.
You did better than I think that anybody in recent memory did. Congratulations as your first president's meeting.
Thank you. It was nerve-wracking, but thank you.